You are listening to the Shoto, Brady, and Dutton Sermon audio. We would love for you to join us live and in person any Sunday. You can watch the sermon video on Sunday afternoons through our Facebook page or at our website, umshoto.net. If you love what we're doing here, you can donate to our ministries at umshoto.net. Thanks for joining us wherever you are.
The scripture reading this morning is from Luke chapter 15, verses 11 through 32, the parable of the prodigal and his brother. Then Jesus said, "There was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the property that will belong to me.' So he divided his property between them. A few days later, the younger son gathered up all he had and traveled to a distant country. And there he squandered his property in dissolute living. When he had spent everything, a severe famine took place throughout the country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of the country, who sent him to the fields to feed the pigs. He would gladly have filled himself with the pods that the pigs were eating, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, 'How many of my father's hired hands have bread enough to spare, but here I am dying of hunger? I will get up and go to my father, and I will say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired hands.' So he set off and went to his father. But while he was still far off, his father saw him and was filled with compassion. He ran and put his arms around him and kissed him. Then the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Quickly, bring out a robe, the best one, and put it on him, and put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. And get the fatted calf and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' And they began to celebrate. Now his elder son was in the field, and when he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. He called one of the slaves and asked what was going on. He replied, 'Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has got back safe and sound.' Then he became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and began to plead with him, but he answered his father, 'Listen, for all these years I have been working like a slave for you, and I have never disobeyed your command. Yet you have never given me even a young goat so that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours comes back, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fatted calf for him.' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. But we had to celebrate and rejoice, because this brother of yours was dead and has come to life. He was lost and has been found.'" This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Thank you, Ross. Well, we continue our sermon series that we started last week, called A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. And it's a sermon series that we're going to explore with Mr. Rogers and Jesus, and what it means to be a neighbor. This whole sermon series is based off at the very least, the themes that are in this movie, A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood, in which Tom Hanks plays Fred Rogers. And it's based on this real-life relationship that he has with a reporter from the magazine Esquire, who gets assigned to do this piece on Mr. Rogers. And if you didn't get a chance to see the movie here at the Roxy last weekend, it's okay. You didn't have to. I'm not going to ruin it for you. And you won't miss much in the sermon series. It's mainly drawing on the themes in the movie. Drawing on the themes of how Mr. Rogers produced his television show, how he lived his life, and certainly how Jesus teaches us to be a neighbor. And so last week, we began this series as we explored our feelings. Hopefully we came away knowing that each and every one of us is human. And at times we're sad or angry. We're joyful. We feel lost and anxious. We feel the full range of human emotion, and that is okay. We feel it deeply within our minds and bodies and souls. And thank God for that. Thank God we have that. Because our feelings are okay. We explored that Jesus, being fully human and fully divine, well, he teaches us to embrace those feelings. And Mr. Rogers, well, he teaches us that they're good, that they're okay. Let us be honest in how we feel in these moments. But not only to be honest about it, but to be open about asking others, about asking our neighbor how they are feeling, and then genuinely caring about their answer. I think both Mr. Rogers and Jesus have something to teach us about being a good neighbor. Genuinely caring about people is a pretty good start. Both Jesus and Mr. Rogers, they have something in common. They do something very similar with one another. See, when Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood would start every episode, Mr. Rogers would walk in from outside, out from in the world, out from in the neighborhood, and he would bring whatever was out there into his living room to talk about it with us. All that he had experienced in the world, he didn't leave it at the door, he brought it in with him. And he didn't shy away from any topic. He spoke openly and honestly about what was going on in the world. He very closely followed the model that Jesus taught. See, Jesus also didn't shy away from any of the tough conversations. In fact, Jesus leans into them pretty heavy. And now, not to say that Mr. Rogers and Jesus are the same, they're not. Mr. Rogers was human. He had faults, and he certainly wasn't perfect. But in my opinion, I think he's the prime example of what it looks like to move on in perfection and love in this life. But he's still not Jesus. Although there are many similarities between Fred Rogers and the way he lived his life, they come directly from what Christ taught. Within this movie and in real life, the man that interviews Mr. Rogers for this magazine article asks him a fairly common question. He said, "Can you tell me the difference between Mr. Rogers and Fred Rogers?" And Fred responds, "I don't understand the question." See, for Fred Rogers, there wasn't a separate character between who he was as Fred and who he was as Mr. Rogers. They were the same. He was doing his best to be authentic in life and on the TV screen. Jesus encounters much of the same skepticism throughout his life and ministry. The religious leaders, they're constantly trying to catch him being inconsistent, and they just can't, because Jesus is Jesus. The consistency of Jesus throughout his message and his teaching and his life, they're what give me hope and love and grace. They're always consistent. Jesus was willing to go and be with all people with this message. He spent time with religious leaders, with tax collectors, and with sinners. And at the beginning of this gospel, of Luke's gospel in chapter 15, that's where we kind of find these religious leaders. There's religious leaders, they're sinners, and they're all gathered around Jesus, listening. And then over here in the background, these religious leaders, they begin to grumble. Well, why is he over there eating and drinking with the sinners and not spending time with us? They're mad. They're mad that Jesus isn't spending time with them, but over here with the others. In my opinion, they were a little bit jealous. But Jesus' response, his response to the grumbling, are three stories. The first two are short and quick. They're about a lost sheep and a lost coin. But this third one, that we've heard this morning, it's a little bit longer and a little bit more complex. See, with a lost sheep and a lost coin, they're all about doing everything you can to find what is lost, the sheep or the coin. But the third is about this prodigal son. And because these stories are told one after another, there's no break in Scripture. Many of us assume, and rightfully so, that the word prodigal means lost. But when we go back to the Greek and we read that word prodigal in Greek, it actually means something closer to wastefully extravagant. And when we use the word prodigal, we are referring to someone that is acting in a wastefully extravagant way. See, we know the story. You've already heard it this morning. The youngest son, the prodigal, tells his father, I want mine. I want my inheritance, and I'm going to leave. And so his father gives him his portion of what he owns and watches his son leave. The son goes and is wastefully extravagant. And that's typically what we focus on in this story. As we should. It's the central theme of what's going on here. But I ask, what if there's more? What if there's something more here to think about in terms of being wastefully extravagant that doesn't necessarily focus on this young man? Let's hear again from the Gospel of Luke. While he was still a long way off, his father saw him and was moved with compassion. His father ran to him and hugged him and kissed him. Then his son said, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I no longer deserve to be called your son. But the father said to his servants, Quickly, bring out the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his fingers and sandals on his feet. Fetch the fatted calf and slaughter it. We must celebrate with feasting because the son of mine was dead and has come back to life. He was lost and is found. And they began to celebrate. But it doesn't end there. Now his older son was in the field. And coming in from the field, as he approached the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked, What is going on? And the servant replied, Your brother has arrived, and your father has slaughtered the fatted calf because he received his son back safe and sound. And the older son was furious. And he didn't want to enter in, but his father came out and begged him. He answered his father, Look, I have served you all these years. I have never disobeyed your instruction, and you've never given me as much as a young goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours returned, after gobbling up your estate on prostitutes, you slaughtered a fatted calf for him. Then the father said to the son, You are always with me. Everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad because this brother of yours was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. The younger son in this story isn't the only one who is guilty of this wasteful extravagance. The father in this story is also guilty of being wastefully extravagant multiple times. See, the son comes by it honestly. The father gives his son the inheritance. He watches him go, and he welcomes him home. He throws a party for him. And then he goes and he reminds the older son, All that I have is already yours. And it leaves the question, how can this man be so wastefully extravagant with his money, with his love, with his grace for both of his sons? Could you imagine putting yourself in the father's shoes for a moment? To be so wastefully extravagant with your love, with your money, with your grace, that your friends and your family are standing there wondering if you have lost your ever-loving mind. Mr. Rogers was often accused of being wastefully extravagant with his presents, with his time, with his energy, with his attention, with his love and grace. See, when you had Fred Rogers' attention, you had it fully. It didn't matter if you were a child or an adult or anywhere in between that. Fred was wastefully extravagant in this way. You had his undivided attention, period. On the phone, in person, however you were with him. Mr. Rogers he patiently and diligently listened to everyone he spent time with. He took notes. He wrote it down. He took pictures. He appreciated his time with people. He spent so much precious time with people, young and old, that they would feel comfortable. So they would feel loved, and so they would feel heard. He had a unique disposition about himself that made people feel instantly comfortable, whether it was on the TV screen or here in real life. Fred was wastefully extravagant in this way. Jesus was also someone who was accused of being wastefully extravagant. Jesus is being accused of it here at the beginning of this parable, of being wastefully extravagant with his time by eating and drinking with the sinners. Jesus follows these accusations with a story of a boy who was wastefully extravagant. Wastefully extravagant in his spending, but also of a father who is wastefully extravagant in his love and grace for his sons. See, often we want to put ourselves in the shoes of the boys, of those sons. Either if it's the prodigal son and that runs off, or the older son who is jealous, we like to put ourselves in their shoes. And then we take a look at the father in this parable as God or as Jesus, and we can't even imagine putting ourselves in those shoes. Showing the same wasteful extravagance, because we've always been taught those aren't our shoes to fill. Our shoes here are of the sons. But what if? What if we're missing an opportunity? An opportunity to put ourselves in the Father's shoes. See, there are certainly times in life in which we are the sons. There's no doubt about it. That we need the wasteful extravagance of the Father. We need that wasteful, extravagant love and grace. There's no doubt about that. But what if there are times in which we are in the Father's shoes and we have the opportunity to share God's love and grace in wastefully extravagant ways? Let's think about how different this world would look if we begin to put ourselves in that Father's shoes and we become actively aware of the moments that we can be wastefully extravagant. How often have we turned on the TV, opened up the newspaper, looked at our phone, and thought, oh, it's terrible. I wish somebody would do something about that. I sure wish this situation was different. And we simply wait around for someone else to address the problem, to offer a solution, or to be wastefully extravagant. But what if? What if you and I are the ones called to be wastefully extravagant in those moments? What if you and I are the ones called to offer love and grace and forgiveness, attention, a buck or two, a meal, a hug, our time, or whatever, so wastefully extravagant that it changes someone's life, that it changes their perspective on God, that it changes their mood, that it changes the way that they treat themselves, their family, or even strangers? What if? What if rather than passively believing that we are the sons in this story, and we actively believe that we are like the Father, that we are called to be wastefully extravagant? Jesus tells this parable to remind these religious leaders that are grumbling, to remind them that he's not just spending time with sinners, that being wastefully extravagant is about making room for all people, the religious leaders and the sinners included. Giving in many ways to the people regardless if they deserve it or not, regardless of what other people think. Being extravagantly wasteful is about welcoming all people with love and grace and forgiveness. And I don't know about you, but this world could use a few more wastefully extravagant people. To be a wastefully extravagant neighbor, I can't help but think it's a lot like loaning out a ladder. Now, your neighbor from down the street comes, knocks on your door, and says, "Hey, can I borrow your ladder?" And you let them borrow that ladder without any expectation that you're ever going to get it back. Some of you have done this. And I know what you're thinking. That's my ladder. I bought that ladder, and if I'm going to loan it out, I want that ladder back. But what if? What if the ladder we're loaning out isn't a ladder? What if it's our attention, our time, our love, our forgiveness, or grace, or something else? Would we expect our neighbor to give it back to us once we're done? I sure hope not. Hopefully, we are willing to give these gifts to people who need them without any expectation that they're ever going to give it back in return. Who cares if you don't get your ladder back? We can go buy a new one. It's just a ladder. But we don't always get a second chance with our neighbors, with our family, or even with strangers to be wastefully extravagant. Jesus took every moment he could to be wastefully extravagant, making room for all people, to be present in their lives, to offer grace and love. So let us do the same thing. Let's follow his example. Let us be present with one another, so present that we never miss another opportunity to be wastefully extravagant. Let us go. Let us go into the world and be just that, as wastefully extravagant as Christ. Pray this in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
You are listening to the Shoto, Brady, and Dutton Sermon audio. We would love for you to join us live and in person any Sunday. You can watch the sermon video on Sunday afternoons through our Facebook page or at our website, umshoto.net. If you love what we're doing here, you can donate to our ministries at umshoto.net. Thanks for joining us wherever you are.